Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. I'm delighted to be joined once again by Mark Newberry, who is Commercial Director for UK and Ireland at Europcar. Hello Mark, good to see you again.
Hi Kate, great to be here. Thank you for inviting me back.
Oh, thank you for joining us. Mark, so Europcar is, I would describe as a platform for mobility.
Yeah.
For the uninitiated, do you want to just expand on what you do and who you're providing services to?
Yeah, sure. So first off, I'll talk a bit about my role, and then I'll talk a bit about Europcar, and then I'll talk a bit about sustainability. So yeah, delighted to be here. So I'm the Commercial Director for Europcar UK and Ireland. So that means I oversee our distribution and our sales across all our channels in both here and in Ireland. I look after our marketing teams in here and in Ireland, and also our customer contact centres. And really, my aim is to make sure that all of those functions work together alongside the other teams that we've got in Europcar to deliver for the customer. So to understand their requirements and to deliver the right vehicle at the right time, and resolve their mobility need. And really, that's something that Europcar have been doing for 75 years now. So we were founded in Paris by an entrepreneur just after the Second World War. So this is our 75th year, and he was a bit of a visionary, really. So up until that point, the automobile had been a really expensive asset. It's still quite expensive today, but proportionately a really expensive asset. And he wanted to find a way of mutualizing that and share it with the people. And so he thought, well, if I can run a business where I can buy these assets and I can share them with folk on a much more affordable basis, and I can give them the kind of mobility that perhaps only the upper classes have got. He actually tried to start the business in the early 1900s, but two world wars scuppered him. So he was really, starting car sharing before we'd even dreamed of it. And so as I sit here today, Europcar, we're in 140 countries worldwide. We're Europe's largest car rental provider. And what people may not realise is that we rent cars, but we also rent vans and trucks. So we do all of those mobility needs. We do them on a flexible basis. I think that's one of the real kind of USPs of a rental business. It can be hours, it can be days, it can be weeks, it can be months. In some cases, it can be years. And that flexibility is really key. And I think it's a topic that we'll come back to when we talk about our transition to electrifying your fleet. So here in the UK, we've got circa 120 rental stations up and down the country. We can provide a delivery and collection service to any postcode in the UK. And when folk think of Europcar, they tend to think of the holiday abroad, car rental, sunshine. But actually in the UK, 65 to 70% of our income is generated through corporate, through business to business relationships. So we provide the vehicles, we provide the fleet that help them run their business. So there might be insurance customers who need replacement vehicles. There might be a construction business that's scaling up or scaling down or changing the nature of their fleet. It might be in emerging sectors like green energy. And so there are lots of different use cases right across the corporate landscape. And I guess like a word running through the middle of a stick of rock, sustainability is kind of running right through everything that we're doing in Europcar. And we really tried to walk the walk first in terms of helping our own colleagues make the transition to driving EVs. So we're up in the 80% of those who are eligible to have a company car drive an electric vehicle. So they've sat in one, they've lived with it, they've experienced it, and that's really helped them when they're having conversations with customers and helping them make that transition. We've been increasing our own proportion of fleet in terms of electric vehicles. And last year, we drove 3.5 million EV miles. And we did 50,000 extra EV rental days compared to the year before. And there's still loads more to do, but we are making progress, and we've worked really hard on electrifying our stations as well. So about 65% of our stations are now electrified. We've tried to focus on the ones where the majority of our EV volume goes through.
Yeah.
And we've got a plan to continue to electrify the rest of our stations. So now there's lots more to sustainability beyond that, but just in terms of the electrification of fleet. And one of the things we've really tried to do is shout loud and proud about our own journey to having an electrified fleet, and to help customers make that journey as well. So we've done things that we wouldn't have done before. So last year we took part in EV Rally. That was the first for the business, and actually the pictures are up here. So we entered 4 vehicles. We did the 1,200 mile route across the 5 days, and the last year it was a capital challenge. So it went from Cardiff to London to Edinburgh to Belfast to Dublin. And it was an amazing experience. We captured lots of it on video. So we wanted to share the learnings with our customers. We wanted to give as many of our people access to the experience. We had about 40 drivers across the 4 vehicles across the 5 days.
Right, okay.
We had customers taking part as well. And so this year we're doubling down on those efforts. So towards the end of last year, we launched our online EV guide that helps people look at the vehicle range that we've got, but look at Zap Maps and look at other tools that help them make the transition. And this year again, we're taking part in EV Rally, which is later this year, and it's more focused on England, and it's doing an A to Z of England, and it's trying to avoid some of those main trunk roads. It's really trying to stress test the charging infrastructure. And we've been really pleased to announce that we are gold partners of the EV Cafe, which is a really great partnership for us. They are an organisation that we've worked with over the past couple of years, and it's been great to announce our partnership. And it will just help us really amplify the message of transitioning across to a zero carbon fleet that we're really excited about. We've been engaging with their community for a couple of years now. They're super passionate around helping this transition, and we think that they can help amplify our message and help people make the transition. So yeah, lots of energy and lots of effort going into trying to help folk make this transition. And we're not there yet. We've got more to do, but we're learning every day. We want to share those learnings as we go.
Great. Well, there's so much there to unpack, Mark, and I've got no doubt at all that learning by doing is absolutely the best way. And you've gone on this journey, so it's much easier for you to then take your customers on that journey, which is great. And I just kind of want to really highlight that flexibility and that importance of flexibility. And I think in this day and age, people are much more aware of the fact that you don't need to own something, that you can rent it or lease it, like you say, even if it's just for an hour, and we see that across so many different industries these days. But fundamentally, owning a very expensive asset that's potentially sitting around for weeks or days or sometimes just hours, it doesn't always make sense. And of course, to be able to test or transition to ultra low emission vehicles like electric vehicles without diving straight in and buying them has an awful lot of merits. So Mark, let's just think about a lot of your customers have already started that transition to electric. Some will not have done. I know that's hard to believe, but there are, in good time. So for those customers, kind of, what's your message to them? What are the important considerations, and how can you help them?
It's I think you said it right when you said it's about testing and learning and having a real world experience. If I just personally reflect on so I've been an EV driver for about 2.5, 3 years. So I'm not a mega early adopter. Some folk have been doing it for 10, 15 years, but I'm I would still be considered ahead of the curve compared to the general population. I remember the first time I sat in it and I drove it, and this is going to sound like a really benign thing to say. I was like, oh, it's kind of just like driving a car.
Surprise.
As daft as that sounds, albeit an automatic car. And so actually the change curve in the driver experience is not that big, and it's therefore just understanding the infrastructure around it. So we really do believe that if you can get people into these vehicles, bums on seats, and if you can give them exposure to it, that will help them overcome quite a lot of that change anxiety that people feel about all sorts of change. And I think folk can try to go for a test drive from OEMs and from manufacturers, but also a short-term rental is another great way of experiencing a vehicle in more kind of real world conditions. You can take it home and use it for a week, and you can start to yourself demystify lots of the perhaps urban myths that are out there around EVs. You can understand how you can charge it. You can understand range. You can start to really experience it.
And that's absolutely crucial, Mark, because if you, and I'm not saying don't do this, but definitely do go to a dealership and test drive as many vehicles as you can. But if you are only in the seat of that car for an hour or an hour and a half, you're not really getting the full experience, which is working out, actually understanding what the real life range of that vehicle is, how frequently you'll need to recharge it, how your driving style affects it, where you're going to recharge it. So there are so many elements to it that actually having a vehicle for a slightly longer period of time really will ease your introduction into this space, I think. You mentioned as well, Mark, when we were talking about, you mentioned drivers and winning the hearts and minds of those drivers and giving them the confidence. You mentioned when the first time you drove a car, it was just like another car, but it was not automatic, and that really resonated with me because that was my big anxiety before I got behind the wheel. I'd never driven an automatic, and a lot of people have never driven automatic, and that is a barrier that we don't talk about very often. It's not a significant barrier, as it turns out, once you've actually encouraged someone to try it.
I remember correctly the very first time I drove an automatic. I was coaching soccer, as they call it, in the States, and I'd flown in, and it'd been my first ever long haul flight. I was 21, arrived in a pair of flip flops and football gear, and they chucked me the keys, like a 3.5 litre thing, and it was an automatic, and I was driving on the wrong side of the road. All the kind of inappropriate use cases that you'd have. You do learn. I think the other thing about the kind of prolonged testing period. So from our data, and this kind of relates a little bit to range anxiety. So on average, we find folk do around 60 odd miles a day in their EV. We know that the average range in EV now is about 250 miles, and they're only ever going to get more as the battery technology continues to improve and so on. And so therefore, if you take it for a couple of hours, or even if you take it for one day, you don't really get to test the charging experience. And so you could leave that experience thinking, great, I've driven one, but still, the charging feels like a faff because you've not lived it. And so I think going through a couple of charging cycles is again key, because you understand the range, how the range works, what it takes to charge, how you can charge effectively. I mean, for the first period of time when I had mine, I was charging on a 3-pin plug at home because I didn't have a home charger. But even how, if you do have to go to a public charger, how you can make that time work for you. You can do other things during that time. Or if you do have access to home charging, how you can charge overnight. You can charge on the day while you're doing things. You start, instead of it costing you time, you start to get time back because you're not at a petrol garage. And so doing this for a couple of days helps. And the charging situation, just to kind of reflect on that slightly. So it is one of the things that does reach the mainstream media. There'll be a picture of a big queue at chargers, and suddenly, the inference is every charger everywhere is oversubscribed. And of course, that's not the case. Of course, there might be queues from time to time, like with anything, but it's not quite the picture they paint. And I think there's a 45% increase last year on the charges from the year before. That map saying there is now kind of circa 54,000 public charges, and that's just increasing. There's a kind of a private network of just under 700,000 of charges, and some people are starting to even list those on that map, so you could charge on someone's driveway.
Yeah.
So this situation is only ever going to trend in one direction, which is more charges and more access to charges, and within the mix, the speed that the chargers are able to provide is also increasing. So there are more of them, and they're gradually becoming faster. And the other thing that the charging networks are really focused on is uptime. One of the complaints kind of early doors was there aren't many chargers, and you get there and it doesn't work. And there are still some experiences, of course, there are chargers that don't work.
Yeah.
Zap Maps, by the way, if you look at Zap Maps and you plan a charger, it will tell you when it's most recently used, and the community will give feedback, so you can, even now you can plan for that. But they're really been targeted on uptime to try and make sure that those chargers have got a high 98-99% uptime. So I think the charging situation is only going to improve. And I know the government are doing some funding, and you're getting kind of big announcements from organisations like Shell, and they're pouring hundreds of millions into this area. So yeah, I think test and learn, get access to an EV, use it for a more prolonged period of time, go through the charging cycle, and just think about the myths that perhaps might have put you off in the first place, and just kind of address them during that experience. And I do think you'll emerge from that a lot more confident about making the choice to have an EV for a longer term rental, or a lease, or even to purchase one.
Yeah, I agree. And when you were talking about the public charging infrastructure growing, and now we're seeing this emergence of peer-to-peer charging and different speeds on the public network. This is the other side to the flexibility that you're offering, isn't it? Flexibility with your choice of vehicle, and then flexibility where, when, and how you charge it, which is great. Yeah. Now, in your introduction, Mark, one last question. In your introduction, you mentioned that you have installed EV charging in 60% of your key location. Was it 60% or 60?
60.
Six of your key locations. What have you learned from that? And what would you consider or advise companies to consider before they embark on this themselves?
I think it's been a really interesting journey. This whole thing, a little bit, for us is an exploration. That's why we're keen to share our learnings, so we can help organisations with their own transition. And I think the first thing I say is there are a lot of organisations out there that help install chargers. So like any procurement process, you've got an opportunity to speak to a number and to understand their ways of working. How long would an installation take? What's their service like post installation? If you have an issue, and like any procurement process, you can compare 2, 3, 4 organisations and pick the one that's right for you. I think so. We one of the things that we had to think about and still think about is grid capacity, and these organisations were asking us lots of questions about electricity, and suddenly we were having to become we're having to learn a lot more about the power that our locations were receiving. And some of that is more challenging, particularly when you operate at airports. So understanding, and these organisations will help you understand where to look and what to do and so on. But having that grid connectivity and grid capacity will be a guide on, therefore, what your capacity is for installing chargers and so on. Another really obvious one is, do you own the property or is it leased? And therefore, if it's leased, you need to engage the landlord. And again, that's probably an obvious one that people would think of when they do any kind of infrastructure work to their property. But that is something to think about. Building access, kind of, have you got decent access for the builders to come and do the work? In some instances, there might be grants or support from government or local councils. That might be another way to access some form of funding that might support you as you do this work. Again, like any procurement, being kind of clear on installation costs. Just make sure you kind of understand what the project is going to cost you, and then is there any supply chain delays? We've had that a couple of times just because we've been doing it over a period, and in general, supply chain issues are starting to ease in general.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the basics of what is it going to do, when is it going to do it, and how much is it going to cost? But just applying to this specific use case, and then of course the ongoing maintenance, because if you are able to get a number of your employees into EVs or even your customers, one of the aspects of charging that we advocate is destination charging. So instead of maybe the thing that folk already see in the media, you go to a motorway service station and you're dormant and you charge. It's more about charging at a place where you're doing something else.
Yeah.
So I don't know, you go to the supermarket and you can plug in while you shop. You go to your place of work and you plug in while you work. So charging happens while you're doing something else.
Yeah.
And so therefore, if you do install them in your workplace, they could be quite well used. And so you just need to make sure you've got that kind of maintenance contract in place, that if they break, if they fail, you've got support there. Is there any kind of ongoing service and maintenance, and so on? So on the one hand, there is a bit to think about, but on the other hand, they are kind of the considerations that you might think about if you're doing any kind of infrastructure building. In some ways, it's just applying it to the specific use case. But yeah, there are organisations out there, have conversations with 2 or 3 of them, and you'll start to build a picture of what's really important to you, and what their service and capabilities are like.
Well, that's great advice, Mark. Thank you very much. As always, it has been a pleasure talking to you. And of course, thank you to Europcar for joining GreenFleet Talks. We look forward to seeing your face popping up on the EV Cafe, yes, and of course at the EV Rally later this year. So an exciting few months for you. So thank you very much.
That's great. Thanks, Kate. And I guess my final message would be that we are facing this environmental challenge, but we're lucky that we're not sat waiting for technology to be built and for an answer to be made. Like, it's here today. Like, it does work today. And it is a change curve for folk to get through these things to consider. But just start on the journey. Start with an incremental approach and start to overcome the fear of change, or those considerations of change, and start to make some progress, because every EV mile removes a nice mile from the road, and that all contributes to the positive environmental benefits. So thank you for having me here, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you, Mark. I echo your sentiments 100%. That is about all we've got time for. Thank you for watching, and please tune in to GF365 again soon.